our special guest. He is an editor of Anti-War News. If you are not following them, make sure you do so. They are doing great work. Let's go ahead and bring him in. Welcome, Dave Decamp. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Sabby. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on. We have been watching your work. I've been watching a lot from antiwarnews.com. I think you guys do a great job. And I saw something from you recently about Venezuela. And this is something that I think quite a bit of people are getting wrong. Donald Trump has made it very clear that he is now referring to the Department of Defense as the Department of War, which is actually true. But you see this conflict with Venezuela is escalating. Donald Trump is saying that this is about drugs. What is really going on here? What is Donald Trump trying to do to Maduro and Venezuela?
Yeah, well, that is the narrative here, that this is about drug trafficking and fighting cartels. And that is something that the MAGA base does support, the idea of taking military action against cartels. But that's not really the real purpose of what's happening here. Because if you get down into the data and you look at the amount of drugs that actually come from Venezuela and come through the Caribbean, where the U.S. just bombed this boat, it's relatively small when it comes to the drugs that come into the U.S. One important point, I think, is that fentanyl does not come from Venezuela. It's not produced there, and it's not shipped through there, according to DEA data. It comes primarily from Mexico. And, a lot of the outrage driving this kind of push toward taking military action against cartels is over the fentanyl deaths, the opiate deaths in the U.S. But when it comes to Venezuela, the allegation is about cocaine. Back in 2020, Bill Barr, Trump's attorney general at the time, indicted Maduro over these claims that he's a narco-terrorist, and it's all about cocaine trafficking. But also, when you zoom in and look at the numbers, the majority of the cocaine that comes to the U.S. goes through the Pacific or Mexico. It goes that route, and just a small amount goes through Venezuela and the Caribbean. And Venezuela does border Colombia, which produces the most cocaine, like 90% of the cocaine in the world. So some is going to be trafficked through Venezuela, but there's really no evidence for this claim that Maduro is like a cartel leader. That's a new claim that we see from this current administration. And we just saw they increased the bounty on his head to $50 million. And so, we're being lied to in kind of a lot of different ways here. And one thing that's important to know is who is really the driving force behind all this. And it looks like Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is running the show. And he has wanted regime change in Venezuela for a very long time. When the first Trump administration tried it, he tweeted a picture of Muammar Gaddafi the moment he was being brutally murdered on the side of the road as a threat to Maduro. So that's the guy who is steering this policy. So, I mean, it's just they're using this, what I think is legitimate outrage from kind of the Trump base over the drug deaths here in the U.S. I do think it's foolish to try to, to turn the drug war into a hot war. I mean, what they're doing here is merging the drug war with the war on terror. It's like two failed things coming together. So in general, I'm against, this idea of bombing the cartels. But the people that want that, they're being fooled into supporting something that is just not even about that. It's a different agenda here. It's clearly that this is a push toward regime change, and we see all these warships deployed in the Caribbean now. And there's reports, and Trump himself has hinted that they're considering actually launching strikes in Venezuela.
Yeah. And this wouldn't be the first time that Trump has tried to find his way into Venezuela. And I think a lot of people forget this, David, but during Trump's first term, he implemented a coup in Venezuela and tried to deny that. But the writing is there on the wall. Anya Parampil from The Gray Zone wrote a book about this. It's called The Corporate Coup. I remember she came on my show to talk about it when her book was released. But Donald Trump to this day still claims, oh, I didn't know anything about that. So it's interesting that people who support Trump all of a sudden have this foggy memory, and they're just like, oh yeah, he said there's drugs coming from Venezuela, so we got to stop those guys. Not to mention that he went after Venezuela before. So it is obvious that the US government is trying to overthrow Venezuela's government. And my question is, what about the other countries in South America? Like, where do they stand on this issue?
I mean, from what I've seen, the president of Colombia has come out against it, even though Colombia is like a major non-NATO ally, has U.S. troops in the country. The president has called basically the claim, because the claim is that Maduro is the leader of the Cartel of the Suns, which doesn't actually exist. It's not like a real organization. It's a label that they use to describe kind of an alleged network of Venezuelan military officials. So he's, come out against saying, that doesn't exist. This is just an excuse to try to overthrow the government, which I thought that was interesting. And then in Mexico, their president, she denied U.S. claims, because another claim was that Maduro's tied to the cartels in Mexico. She denied those claims. We've seen Lula in Brazil come out against this. But of course, you also have, the other U.S. allies who have supported all the regime change efforts in Venezuela. But it does seem like, the thing is that it's such like a phony narrative. Even like there's these U.S. funded think tanks that do research on this stuff and are very critical of Maduro's government, and they probably want it to be overthrown too. But even they've come out and said, this is just they're misrepresenting everything here with this Cartel of the Suns thing and these claims about Maduro being the head of a cartel. So it's just like these lies just seem so blatant, but a lot of people are falling for them.
They are indeed. And Maduro was questioned about this recently. I just want to share this with everyone. Recent interview with Maduro. We're going to start right about here. Everyone, listen to this, and I'll kind of, tell you what he's saying in English here. But right now he says it's also an extremist card.
No pueden decir de Maduro que tiene armas de destrucción masiva. O pueden decir de mí lo que dijeron de Saddam Hussein. No pueden. Nadie les creería.
So Maduro was saying that they can't say that I have weapons of mass destruction, as they were able to say about Saddam Hussein. He said they bring up stories they invented.
Entonces sacan los relatos que han sacado hollywoodenses, donde Maduro es el malo de la película y los buenos son ellos. Y entonces van a mandar a su ejército. Los buenos de la película, catires así, rubios, fortachones, vienen a buscar al latino, al malo.
So he is saying that they make it seem like this is a Hollywood movie and Maduro is the villain and the United States government are the good guys coming to get the Latino, the bad guy.
Pero la verdad de la película, los pueblos la saben. Que el malo no es el que dicen ellos. Que el malo es el que escribe la película. El que hace la película ya. Esos son los verdaderos malos, como le hemos demostrado múltiplemente. Venezuela es un país libre, completamente libre del fenómeno del narcotráfico.
So he said that the real bad guys are the ones who are writing the script, not him. And he says that Venezuela is free, completely free from the phenomenon of drug trafficking free.
Libre. Aquí no hay una hectárea sembrada de plantaciones de hojas de coca. No hay laboratorios de cocaína. Y los que nos meten en la frontera, pim, pum, pa, nosotros mismos los destruimos.
He said that there are no cocaine labs in Venezuela.
Nuestras fuerzas policiales, nuestras fuerzas militares. No hay ni una hectárea de marihuana. Porque además la marihuana la producen ahora en territorio estadounidense de manera legal.
He said not even marijuana. And he also had mentioned that the people who tried, I guess, come across the border to bring cocaine in, he basically said that the military, the Venezuelan military, handles that.
Es una marihuana enriquecida.
Y la consumen hasta ciertos presidentes estadounidenses también.
No, y todo el consumo de todas las drogas en Estados Unidos.
Confesados por ellos mismos.
All right. And then they went on to talk about people smoking weed in the U.S. But the point that he made there, Dave, it's still crazy to me that people are falling for this again. You remember the Iraq War. I remember the Iraq War. We all remember they told us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And of course, we know that was a big lie, right? So it's like the U.S. government, they come up with these excuses as to why we need to go to war with said country. You mentioned Gaddafi. One of the things they said about him was that they said Gaddafi was killing his own people. And they don't even have to have proof. All they have to do is just say it. And now they're telling you, they're saying, well, Maduro is bringing all these drugs into the United States, and as if that's the only place that drugs come from, as if it's more than what it's more than what it actually is. You mentioned Mexico. You're right. There is a lot that comes from Mexico, but also people produce and make drugs right here in the US. And so it's crazy to me that people are not just willing to use common sense. I don't even want to say do your own research, just use common sense. Haven't they done this before? Haven't they sold a war to you based on a lie before?
Yeah, and here I do think it is really obvious what's happening here, because again, the players, it's the another Trump administration, another push for regime change, and you got Marco Rubio calling the shots. And the things that Maduro says there, from the stuff that I've read from the DEA, from the UN's data, he's right when he says, there might be some coca plants or cocaine labs in Venezuela, but Venezuela is not known as a country that produces any cocaine, even though it borders Colombia. So that, these are important details when we're talking about this. So it's just so obvious to me, and I think to anyone who really pays any attention to this stuff, what this is really about. And of course, another big thing is that Venezuela sits on the biggest oil reserves in the entire world. No country has more oil than Venezuela. So I'm sure that's got something to do with it too. And that's actually, when Trump first came in, Rick Grinnell, who I forget exactly what his position is in this administration, but he went over to Venezuela and he brought home some Americans who were held in jail there and engaged directly with the Maduro government. And apparently he's clashed with Rubio over this stuff. But Maduro has shown that he's willing to cooperate with the Trump administration. He's been cooperating on deportations, and he's still, they still are behind the scenes, as I understand, the two governments. And over the weekend, the defense minister announced that they were deploying additional troops to the coastal regions and to the border with Colombia to crack down on drug trafficking, almost as a way to say, like, makes it maybe seem that they're trying to placate Trump to some extent here to see if they can avoid all this. So that's another thing here, is that it's not like Venezuela is asking for a fight, like not by any means. Even with the U.S. deploying all these warships off their coast, even with them bombing boats, they're still making it clear that they're willing to play ball with the U.S. And, we really just see this time and time again. I mean, we saw it with Iran. They attacked them while they were literally engaged in negotiations. And saw it today in Qatar, the bombing Hamas amid negotiations when they're literally meeting to discuss a U.S. ceasefire proposal. So it really just shows that, no matter what these countries do, like if there's an agenda, they're going to push ahead with it. And you mentioned the War Department rebranding. I mean, I agree. Like that's a much more appropriate and accurate name. And for our editorial purposes at antiwar.com, I love it because I could just write War Secretary Pete Hegseth. I think it flows very nicely. But it's also kind of a little scary, like the fact that he's just saying, "Yep, this is the War Department. We're all about war." And he just visited this Navy ship in the Caribbean, went to Puerto Rico, and they're saying that this is going to be open-ended, and we just don't really know what exactly they're going to do here. And it really seems like anything can happen.
Yes, it does. And the Oracle said the U.S. wants access to Venezuela's oil. Absolutely. It just always seems to be the countries that have resources that the U.S. government wants. Like that's the thing. And, they'll be the first to point at these countries and say that they're third world countries or they're poor. They don't have anything, but they're rich in resources. And so it just, you can't shrug off like that coincidence. And then another thing I want to point to when we talk about Venezuela, you mentioned that Maduro was willing to work with Donald Trump with the deportations, with immigration. And it just goes to show you that even when you try to work with the U.S. can still come after you if you have something that they want.
Yeah. It seems like, and actually another thing that happened recently was that the U.S. allowed Chevron to start pumping oil again in Venezuela, like right before all of this kind of started popping off. So they've sent some pretty mixed signals here to the Venezuelan government, but they're still going through with this. And for Rubio, I mean, this is really ideological. He's the son of Cuban immigrants, and we see that the Cuban exiles, in the U.S. politically, they really agitate for the continuing the embargo on Cuba, which is really a relic of the Cold War. And also, they agitate against the Venezuelan government because they're, allies of Cuba, and Nicaragua as well. It's what John Bolton, when he was in, he was a big part of the Venezuela, the first attempt at regime change and backing the coup in Juan Guaido. He dubbed Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, he called them the Troika of tyranny. They even have a little name for it. So this is an agenda, it's also kind of an ideological thing for Rubio and kind of these people who have a pretty significant influence on the U.S. government.
And another thing I think is really important, he did send U.S. troops that way. So we can't, this is one of those times where I know some people have said with Russia and Ukraine, they said, well, they're not sending U.S. troops, so da-da-da. Donald Trump sent U.S. troops towards Venezuela immediately. So it just, you can't look at this and say this does not have an impact on Americans here at home. It really does. They are literally sending U.S. soldiers there. I think when this first started, Maduro said, I will have 4 million, or I think it's 4 million militia waiting for them in Venezuela. And I think Donald Trump was sending like 4,000 troops. You're essentially sending like American soldiers to their death, like 4,000 versus 4 million. That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, it is a huge escalation and provocation what he's done here with these deployments. And that's the thing. I mean, I don't think they haven't sent a force that they can invade Venezuela with. And we've seen all these kind of mixed messages from U.S. officials in the Trump administration, which seems to be a theme of this administration. I think they kind of purposely throw out all this, conflicting information to just kind of confuse people and keep people on their toes. But there's this report from Axios, I think it was last week, that quoted all these different U.S. officials who were saying like different things about what it was about. What one official said, oh, this is definitely about drug trafficking. Another one said, oh, it could be Noriega Part 2, referring to the time the U.S. invaded Panama in 1989 to take out Manuel Noriega. You see the threats, but like, really, is it an invasion force? It's about, among those 4,000 troops is about 2,200 Marines. So they would be the only ones that would actually go on shore. And I mean, you would be sending 2,000 Marines to their death here. So what I could see happening, what seems pretty likely to me at this point, is U.S. drone strikes against maybe Maduro or against other government officials to put pressure on them. Because again, the narrative is, okay, we're here to go after cartels, and they also claim the whole Venezuelan government is a cartel. So it's like they have the justification, not that it's a real justification, but they have the pretext that they need if they want to start bombing people. I mean, and you saw with Trump, they bombed a boat. He claimed, oh, these people were narco terrorists, no evidence or anything. It's really bringing the war on terror to our hemisphere.
It's murder.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what they do in the Middle. We've seen them do in the Middle East and across Africa. And now they're bringing it closer to home, which is pretty scary. And they claim Maduro's a narco terrorist, so that they have, this is what Israel does. Everybody's a terrorist. That means we can just kill them all. So yeah, I would be pretty nervous right now if I was, in Maduro's government.
And even when we talk about regime change, what we've seen before in the past and what continues to happen. So it is very apparent that they are going to try to find a way to overthrow Maduro. And when they do that, if we're following the playbook, they will install a leader of their choosing, a Western puppet. Oftentimes, as we've seen, when regime change does happen, the people in those countries are worse off after the regime change than they were before. And so for the people who take issue, if you're taking an issue with the immigration issue or the migrant issue, what do you think is going to happen? Where do you think those people are going to go? Right? When they're facing that regime change, people will they'll either have to stay there and deal with the consequences, or they will try to leave. So this is why I always continue to say, even when it comes to immigration, let's look back and bring it back to the U.S. global policies that they've been implementing all over the world, how they just go into a country, overthrow a leader, have regime change, and the people there are suffering even more than they were before. I just want people to really think about this. Like, how would you think about it this way? Imagine if another country just came and overthrew the president of the United States. And then they said, we're going to assign a different person to be your president. That's what we do. It's like, it's crazy.
And if you look at Juan Guaido, who was the man that the U.S. declared was president of Venezuela back in 2019, at the time he had virtually no support in Venezuela. And then he went on to call for foreign intervention, to overthrow the government of Venezuela. And like there was some polling, like what little support he had after he tried to do a coup on behalf of a foreign power was just gone. And now I think he's living in Florida. And and that's the thing, is that the Guaido and these like so-called opposition leaders who are in the U.S., they have the ear of Rubio. They're telling him, oh, if you take out Maduro, we'll be able to get our guy in there, and it'll all be great. Which I don't think it'll go that great. And this isn't Iran. Like, I think this recent war against Iran, they were hoping that they could do a quick, decapitation of the government and regime change, and they didn't really care. Like, I think if anything, Israel would want Iran to kind of plunge into chaos like Libya. But I don't think the U.S. would actually want that for Venezuela, because the migrants aren't going to go to Europe. They're going to come here. So, I mean, they have to have that in mind. But again, I think they just have the people who are really driving this are just selling them this idea that they could install a popular leader or something. But I just, as you said, when a foreign country is trying to impose its will on your country, generally people don't support that. And this was something they knew that the sanctions on Venezuela that they imposed in 2019, when they really tightened them, they knew that was going to lead to more migration out of Venezuela. And another thing that they cite is this gang, Tren de Aragua, which is from Venezuela. And according to U.S. law enforcement, they've been active in the U.S. just in recent years. And that was a result of all the Venezuelans leaving Venezuela. Like they took advantage of the migrant crisis. So it's just like, you're going to do it all again. You're going to cause another migrant crisis by bombing Venezuela. I mean, it all seems so crazy. Like, they have to think of this stuff, but at the same time, what else are we seeing? What's the purpose of all this if they're not going to take it to that next level?
That's right. I want to pivot to Israel for just a second. There was a bus attack in Jerusalem, and the timing of all this is very suspicious, very suspicious. Benjamin Netanyahu, from what I understand, was supposed to testify yesterday. He was supposed to have an appearance. You guys know that he is sitting on a mound of charges. And I think what he's been doing is continuing these war efforts or attacks so that he doesn't have to face reality here. But in Jerusalem, it says here, this was Benjamin Netanyahu speaking at the scene of the Jerusalem shooting alongside the National Security Minister, Ben Gvir. This was the other day, and he is basically saying that they are now at war. Now, they have said that it was Palestinians showed up and started shooting at Israelis that were getting off of these buses here in Jerusalem. So he is not speaking in English, so I will read it for those of you who are listening while you're driving or working or whatever. But he's not speaking in English, so that tells you who he's speaking to, right? So he begins by saying, we're at war.
אנחנו במלחמה, מלחמה עצימה נגד הטרור בכמה חזיתות. ראשית אני רוצה לשלוח תנחומים למשפחות הנרצחים, וכמובן איחולי החלמה לפצועים.
So he says that they're facing a war on multiple fronts, and he wishes his condolences to the family members that were murdered.
כשאני אומר שאנחנו במלחמה עצימה בכמה חזיתות, יש לנו כמובן הצלחות אדירות נגד משטרי הטרור, נגד ארגוני הטרור, אבל המלחמה נמשכת גם ברצועת עזה, שבה נחריב את החמאס, כפי שהבטחנו ונשחרר את חטופינו, כל חטופינו, ולצערנו גם בירושלים. ביהודה ושומרון פעלנו בתקיפות רבה מאוד.
So he said they're taking very strong action in Judea and Samaria. Basically, what he's saying here is that they have been able to fight back against the terrorists. Of course, everyone's terrorist but them. And then goes on to say, but now we're still being attacked.
השב"כ וצה"ל סיכלו מאות, וגם משטרת ישראל, סיכלו מאות פיגועים השנה. אבל לצערנו לא בבוקר הזה. אנחנו עכשיו במרדף, בכיתור של הכפרים שמהם באו המרצחים.
So this is important. He says that the IDF and the IOF have been able, I guess, to wean off those attacks, but not that morning, he said. Everyone hold on to that, please, because once again, I find it very strange that just once again, all of a sudden, they're not around, right?
ואנחנו נשיג את כל מי שסייע באדם, כל מי ששילח אותם, ואנחנו ננקוט בצעדים קשים עוד יותר. אני רוצה לומר בצורה הכי ברורה, הרציחות הללו, הפיגועים הללו, בכל הגזרות, הם לא מרפים את ידינו. הם רק מגדילים את הנחישות שלנו, להשלים את המשימות שלקחנו על עצמנו. גם בעזה, גם ביהודה ושומרון, בכל מקום.
See, did everybody see what he just said there? He said, so we are going to basically attack even stronger. He goes on to say, this part is kind of important. In Gaza, Judea, Samaria, and everywhere. So everyone hold on to that part where he says everywhere.
ביהודה ושומרון, בכל מקום. אנחנו נלחמים בטרור, במשטר הטרור של החות'ים, באיראן שמגבה את כולם, בעזה, בלבנון, בחיזבאללה, בכל הגזרות. אנחנו לא מרפים וגם לא נרפה. אנחנו נעצים את הפעולות שלנו, ואנחנו נשיג את כל המטרות שלנו.
He said they're going to intensify their operation. So, David, to me, this basically was Benjamin Netanyahu's way of saying they're probably going to go in even heavier in the West Bank now. First of all, what do you think about this attack that happened in Jerusalem the other day? I just find it strange that once again, all of a sudden, the IDF and the IOF just happened to not be present on the same day that Benjamin Netanyahu was supposed to go to trial.
Yeah, I mean, it is a convenient coincidence for Netanyahu. I see no reason to think it's like a false flag or anything like that. But as you said, is there potential for a stand down or something? I guess that's possible. But at the same time, this is, he's sitting there, standing there next to Ben Gvir, who the Israeli national security minister, who has been trying to provoke the Palestinians, basically since he's been in that position. He's constantly going to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, bringing a big group of Israeli settlers to, which is a huge provocation to the Palestinians, to the Muslims in the region. And of course, we've seen this increase in violence in the West Bank, the both Israeli military raids and Israeli settler attacks and murders and terrorism. I mean, just about as bad as it can get. And I've been surprised that we haven't seen more. That it's not like a third intifada happening in the West Bank. I think a lot of Palestinians realize that any kind of armed attack is just going to provoke more Israeli, they're just going to step things up. So I think this is exactly what Ben Gvir, Netanyahu, Smotrich wanted, so they can, use it as an excuse to escalate even more in the West Bank. I mean, in the northern West Bank, in the refugee camps in Jenin and Tulkarem, they've basically destroyed the place. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been displaced there. And that would be, if that was happening independent of what's happening in Gaza, independent of the genocidal destruction that we've seen in Gaza, I mean, that would be in all the headlines about Israel and Palestine would be about what's happening in the West Bank. So, it's what these guys want, whether, however it happened, this is clearly playing into their agenda. And Smotrich, too, he put out a statement saying that these West Bank villages have to be turned into Rafah and Beit Hanun, referring to the cities in Gaza that are just completely demolished and rubble. So it's certainly what they wanted to push their, takeover of the West Bank.
Here's why I think it could be a false flag, right? In other words, here's why I think Israel could be behind it. I'm thinking about all the checkpoints that they have in Israel. Like I know, a number of people who have been there. Kim Iverson has explained all the checkpoints she had to go through. Ta-Nehisi Coates talked about all the checkpoints that you have to go through. So I'm just trying to figure out, how were they able to get through those checkpoints with weapons and then make their way all the way to the buses? I guess I'm just trying to figure out like how that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, I really don't know. I don't know enough about that specific area of Jerusalem, to say, but I know it's in what is considered, Israeli occupied East Jerusalem, right near West Bank settlements and everything. But yeah, I mean, you're right that the Palestinians, traveling there, they have to go through all these checkpoints, and they wouldn't just be able to bring a rifle along or something. So, that is true. Maybe there could have been some kind of stand down or something, but we really don't know.
Yeah, I know. It's just one of those things. I'm just looking at the timing of everything. And of course, Benjamin Netanyahu makes it seem like he's such a victim. I just want to show everybody what else was supposed to happen. And Dr. Simon Gadek said, what a coincidence. Netanyahu won't testify at trial today in wake of Jerusalem shooting attack. So that was supposed to happen. And he has managed to be able to stay out of court. Right. And he's supposed to go there. He just continues to continue war, whether it's not even like just attacking Gaza. I feel like he keeps finding ways to attack other countries just so he can continue to stay in power, because the reality is they're not going to try to vote him out of office while all of this is going on. And then also, from what I've heard from people who have been to Israel, is that a lot of the Israelis are to the right of Benjamin Netanyahu, or they feel as though he's not even going far enough. So it really just, it makes you wonder. It's really crazy. But what I noticed from corporate media, and I'm sure you probably noticed this as well, was that the way they talked about the 7 Israelis that were killed in that attack compared to the way that they speak about, I will say, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. I don't believe it's just 50,000 people. The way they speak about the deaths of the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians is very telling.
Yeah. I mean, for what I do for antiwar.com, every day I write kind of an update on Gaza, of the violence. And I mean, it's every single day that I see pictures and videos of women and children who were like shredded apart or shot. Or just today, I did a story and there was a young boy who was shot and killed while he was trying to get aid. And you just, you don't ever hear about them. It is something. There was like some Israeli member of the Knesset, I forget his name, but he said something in some news show, like, basically, we've learned that we can kill 100 Palestinians a day and nobody in the world will care. And that's true. I mean, they just get away with it every day. I mean, one of the reasons why I just cover it, I cover the health ministry because they put out a number every day. So I cover it. I think it's just worth tracking it, because it is like, these are people being killed, being murdered with our tax dollars. And yeah, I mean, even some of these most heinous attacks, the one recently, the double tap strike in the Nasser hospital where they killed 5 journalists. I mean, that got a lot of attention because it was during a broadcast. I mean, it was filmed for the whole world to see. But even that, like, compared to the what we've seen, all the statements about the Israelis that were killed at the bus stop, there's certainly a difference there. I mean, even the news agencies like Reuters, like, their cameraman was killed. Their camera was the one that they claimed was a Hamas camera, yet they still published without like questioning the Israeli claim that they bombed a Hamas camera. So that's really shameful. The same thing with the AP. Like, they had a report that was good because it detailed how Israel lied, but it wasn't, the way that they cover it. Like, they're not sticking up for their people who are being killed, the people who literally work for them, who are being killed in Gaza. Yeah, it's really infuriating to see that.
Yeah, and there was another attack, and this one's a little bit shaky. Some news outlets confirmed that the flotilla boat that Greta Thunberg was on was hit by a drone strike. And some other outlets are saying that's not the boat that she was on. I'm not really sure. There's different things being said there, but either way, there was a drone attack on one of the flotilla boats. There are 50 of them that are headed towards Gaza. And I just kind of feel like and there are Americans on those boats. once again. And I feel like corporate media is just like, yeah, whatever. And I feel like our government is just like, yeah, whatever. Like it's not even happening. Like, how is that even legal? Like, isn't that against international law for them to just have a drone attack on one of those flotilla boats?
Yeah. And they did it earlier this year. I forget the name of the boat, but it was one of the first flotilla boats. It was off the coast of Malta. So it was in Europe that they drone bombed this flotilla boat, and nobody cared about that. And then actually right before we started, I saw, I think it was Dropsite News tweeted that there's another attack, a second attack on one of the flotilla boats off Tunisia. And as I understand, the first attack, it's the boat that Greta Thunberg is on, but she was on shore at the time because they're in Tunisia. So thank God nobody was killed or hurt in that attack. And it's not clear exactly what happened. One of the crew members, the one that there was actually a video of him, like he was going to like look at something, and then you hear an explosion. He said it looked like a small drone dropped something, and then there was a video of like some kind of incendiary device being dropped on the boat, and then an explosion happening. But yeah, I mean, this is like, I don't even know like what the word is for this kind of behavior, that these attacks, and the world just, the US just not even saying anything about it. It just doesn't matter. And the people who are on these boats are all risking their lives, especially this big flotilla, because I mean, what is Israel going to do if 50 boats are going into Gaza? They're not going to be able to raid every single one of them. So I mean, I think we're going to see more of this.
That's exactly what I was wondering. I'm like, how are they going to be able to stop all 50 boats at the same time?
Yeah. And I know back in, what was it? I think 2010, there was, I forget the exact number. I should know, but I want to say like 6 boats or something that were trying to break the blockade on Gaza. And they were raided by the IDF. And in one of the boats, 9 Turkish activists were killed. So, there's this similar things have happened before and did not end well. But yeah, I mean, you see what Israel does every day, the starvation. I mean, people are starving to death. There's famine that Israel has imposed on Gaza. I mean, if they can get away with that, I mean, it's hard to imagine there's anything that they could do that would get the U.S. to stop giving them the bombs and the weapons to do all this stuff. Even bombing Qatar, which Trump is trying to claim he was not, privy to the decision or anything, which I mean, I think that's very hard to believe. But anyway, it's just, like what they can, it really seems like they can get away with anything.
Well, Dave, you've been doing great work. Where can people follow what you're doing?
Yeah, so our website is antiwar.com, which is where you could find my news coverage. That's basically my job, is kind of following the news and writing articles to cover things. And we also have a viewpoint section where we have great opinion pieces kind of from our writers, and we link to stuff from other sites as well. So a lot of content at antiwar.com that we publish every day. And then my show is called Anti-War News, which if you're on YouTube, you could go subscribe to the channel. And also follow me on X at Decamp Dave. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.